Hello, my name is Nobi Nakamura, Program Officer at the Japan Foundation Toronto. Thank you very much for joining us for a special talk as part of the Healthy Hakko, the Fermented Culinary Arts of Japan. Today we have special guests, Sandor Katz and Shiori Kajiwara, joining us for a talk. In conjunction with this talk, we are streaming on Japan Foundation website a documentary called Katsuo-Bushi, directed by Yu Nakajima, and also the film Fermented by John Kianfrani. So please take a look at the films if you have time. So we're going to start this talk with Sandor talking about his journey with fermentation. Sandor Katz is a fermentation revivalist, and his books, Wild Fermentation and the Art of Fermentation, along with hundreds of fermentation workshops he has taught around the world, have helped catalyze a broad revival of the fermentation arts. A self-taught experimentalist who lives in rural Tennessee, the New York Times calls him one of the unlikely rock stars of the American food scene. Sandor is the recipient of a James Beard Award and other honors. Thank you. So yeah, I guess Sandor, if you're okay to continue speaking, I'm going to have some of the slides, pictures that you shared with me. They'll just be going on in the background, but please go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this event. And I call myself a fermentation revivalist because fermentation has been such an important part of how people everywhere, certainly in Japan, but really in every part of the world, have made effective use of whatever food resources are available to them. And it's really been, you know, an integral part of culinary arts and culture more broadly, you know, except that in our time, as you know, fewer people have anything to do with food production, people are becoming more and more distanced from these practices. And because this has happened during the same period of time that people have become afraid of bacteria, it's become very easy for people to project all of their anxiety about bacteria onto the idea of fermenting food. And people sometimes imagine that it's, you know, very, you know, complex or technical or precise science, you know, when in fact it is really a culinary art. I got interested in all of this about 30 years ago. I made my first batch of sauerkraut. I have been fermenting vegetables ever since, but you know, the earliest ferments that I learned how to make were sauerkraut and yogurt. And I started a sourdough starter for baking bread using the natural leavening of a community of organisms. But really very, very early in my interest in fermentation, I became interested in some Japanese fermentation traditions. At the time, I was very strongly influenced by macrobiotics, which is like a food movement that is, you know, really inspired by a Japanese cuisine, and I learned how to make amazake. And at some point in that first year of my interest in fermentation, somebody pointed me to this book that's in English, written by an American man, William Shurtleff, and his Japanese wife, Akiko Ayogi, The Book of Miso. And it was information about how to make miso. And in that first year that I was fermenting, I actually made miso. Now, I didn't learn how to make koji. This book describes how to make koji, but that just was intimidating to me at the time. Particularly the aspect of maintaining a warm temperature for 48 hours. So it was some years before I learned how to make koji for myself. But there are several commercial miso makers in the U.S., and I was able to purchase some Koji. And so the first year that I was fermenting, I made some miso and I made some amazake. And I have made miso every year since then. I have a jar right here. This is a chickpea barley miso that I made in 2018. That is the one that's open in my refrigerator that I'm eating right now. My crocks of miso are not here in my kitchen. I live in a rural area and my house has a cellar. So they are stored in the unheated cellar downstairs. But koji is something that I make really quite often. I have created a little incubation chamber so that it's easy for me to maintain the temperature that I need in order to make koji. And I also make sake. I learned from some of the images in this slideshow are at the Terada Honke brewery that I had the great pleasure of visiting. This huge steaming vat of rice is from there. At Terada Honke, talking to the head brewer there, the 24th generation brewer, Masaru, he told me about a method of sake making that is called Bodai Moto. And, it just really, its simplicity appealed to my, general orientation that, fermentation does not need to be extremely difficult and extremely technical. And to make the moto, the starter for the Bodai Moto method of sake, all you do is you take some rice that is raw, and you take some rice that is cooked and you put them together in water. And you want to make sure the raw rice is in some sort of a mesh bag where you can remove it. And the raw rice serves as the source of bacteria and yeast. The cooked rice serves as a source of accessible nutrients for those bacteria and yeast. And after a few days in water, you start to see bubbling as these microorganisms come to life. And at that point, you remove the raw rice and steam that. And meanwhile, you've been making some koji, and then you add koji to the newly cooked rice that had been raw and add that back into the bubbly water with the previously cooked rice. And then, after about 10 days or 2 weeks, depending on the temperature, you have sake. So I have been making sake. Here's a bottle of my sake. It's really lovely. One of my friends tasted some, and we've been teasing him for a year. He said it tastes like sake. I don't know what he expected it to taste like, but it's wonderful. Now, when you make sake, then you have the residue of that, the solid residue, the kasu. And so, I've been playing with lots of ways to use kasu, making bread with kasu, rising the bread, being the leavening power. But, my very favorite thing to do with kasu, I actually learned from some friends with a pickle shop in California, the cultured pickle shop in Berkeley. And they taught me how to make beautiful kasuzuke. So in this container, I have, now it's about 2 months, and I intend to leave it for at least 6 months, but it's purple daikon in a bed of kasu mixed with some salt and additional sugar. I'm aging this for months. I play around with lots of varieties of tsukemono. incredibly varied Japanese ways of pickling vegetables. So in my cellar right now, I have some takuan pickles, which are, a favorite style of pickles. They're daikon radishes, dried in the sun for a few days, not till they're crispy dry, but you want to dry them until they're very pliable. And then you remove the leaves from them, brush off any remaining soil, and then you make a mix of rice bran and salt, and you layer in rice bran and salt, and then a spiral of the flexible daikons, and then more rice bran and salt, and then put a heavy weight over it, and that's in my cellar aging. Another wonderful, Koji ferment that I know has become very popular in Japan in recent years is Shiori Koji. And so I have several different styles of Shiori Koji. This is my favorite one. This is with chestnuts. Outside of my house, I have all these chestnut trees. And in the fall, I'm collecting chestnuts, and I grow some koji on some of the chestnuts. And this is a chestnut Shiori Koji. I mostly use it for marinating things. And I like to, give them a long time, several days of marinating, because the enzymes are still active. And, that's the extraordinary thing about koji, is it has all of these enzymes that can break down proteins into amino acids and make things so much more flavorful. They can break down complex carbohydrates into simple sugars and make things sweeter. They can even break down fats. So Shiori Koji really brings out the flavor in things. And, I think that, if we think about soybeans, if you just cook a soybean and eat it, it has a flavor. It has a flavor that could be nice, but it doesn't have a very strong flavor. It has a very, very mild flavor. But when you ferment the soybeans for a long time, it develops like a much stronger, more compelling flavor. The flavor that in Japanese is called umami. The difference between a soybean that's been cooked and shoyu is extraordinary. It's a transformation, wrought by the enzymes of koji, along with bacteria and yeast over a long period of time. I do have a big crock full of shoyu that's fermenting. It's actually over a year old now, but I'm continuing to stir it every few days. I'm waiting for the color to get even darker. I want, one of the things that happens over time in these long-term ferments is caramelization. And this just makes for these like deeper, richer flavors. I want to just highlight a few books in English about Japanese fermentation. So I already showed the book of miso. Well, I might as well show my books. Okay, so Wild Fermentation, The Art of Fermentation, and incidentally, if there are any Japanese speaking people watching, both of these books have been published in Japan. This is a book by Nancy Singleton Hachitsu, who is an American-born woman from California who married a Japanese farmer decades ago and has, spent most of her adult life living in Japan, raising a family in Japan. But she's written some excellent books in English about Japanese cuisine, including this book that focuses on preservation and has lots of fermentation. The book of miso, I showed you. There's a more in-depth book that the same couple wrote called The Book of Miso Production that has much more information on koji and information about how some commercial enterprises at different scales set up their systems. Just this year, a wonderful book has been published in English called Koji Alchemy. And, it has information about traditional applications, but also like a lot of, cutting edge ideas for new applications of, how, experimental chefs can use koji. And it's just full of really exciting, interesting ideas. There's another book that came out last year, Miso Tempeh Natto. It's broadly about the fermentation of beans and sort of a pan-Asian perspective. It's the first thing I've seen written in English about natto, which is another Japanese ferment that I've really come to love. And then I just wanted to show, I don't have one of these that's my favorite, but there are a number of books about tsukemono and the incredibly varied traditions that exist in Japanese cuisine for pickling vegetables. So I guess I just want to wrap up by saying that Japanese cuisine just has some of the broadest range and most extraordinary traditions of fermentation in the world. I mean, there are many related traditions, particularly, Koji is a Japanese word and concept, but, similar fungus fermentations are used certainly all across Asia, and it's come to my attention recently that there's also traditions in parts of South America of using similar fungus for fermenting grains and starchy roots. In Japan, as in everywhere in the world, fermentation is just like an integral part of how people make effective use of food resources. And in many cases, it's preservation, but there are many other advantages to fermentation, including in terms of nutrient availability, in terms of probiotics, in terms of flavor, and we can't overlook flavor because we need our food to taste good. And of course, alcohol. The only way that human beings have ever created alcohol is through fermentation. I personally feel indebted to these Japanese traditions, and I love to share them with people. And I feel very honored to be part of this conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandor. That was excellent. I think Nancy Singleton Hatsu, she appears in actually in one of your some of your photos as well, and also she's also in the film Fermented, introducing the miso maker to the chef Lee.
Well, I had a wonderful visit with her and her family. Her husband made kaburazuki for me, which is like yellowtail fermented with rice and turnips. I was able to attend their annual New Year's mochi making party, and that was just incredibly fun to be part of a big group of people making mochi. So such a like beautiful food, and just such a fun texture to eat and work with.
Thank you. We're going to continue the discussion about fermentation. I guess particularly with an interest in Koji that Sandor was also mentioning. So I'd like to introduce Shiori Kajiwara. She lives in Toronto and hails from Fukuoka, Japan, and she is a certified Koji specialist as well as a registered acupuncturist. As a mother of 3 boys, she immigrated to Canada with her family over 10 years ago and made Toronto her home. She's been organizing workshops regularly at the Hidamari Club, made up of family-friendly moms group since 2009. And their goal is to develop a place where Japanese families help each other and aim to be a place where moms shine by sharing their knowledge while raising their children. Part of the club activities included vegetarian cooking classes, miso and koji related classes. And being an acupuncturist and a certified koji specialist, you might think that maybe these 2 fields don't seem related, but they are inseparable. Shiori-san would like to work on a more sort of whole or holistic approach and not just the parts of the philosophy behind Japanese acupuncture and Koji. And she is keen to embrace Japanese culture and hand down these important and beautiful skills and knowledge correctly to the next generation. So with that, Shiori-san, please share a little bit more about your journey with fermentation.
Okay, so first of all, thank you so much for inviting me for this wonderful opportunities. And it's very fun to hear about what Sandor's story is. And I very appreciate that you have a lot of interest to Japanese culture and Japanese food cultures. And I think it's pretty much all of it. Yeah, he explained me all of like how great the Japanese culture and Japanese fermentation is. But just let me explain about what I do by myself. And I'm just a title called a certified Koji specialist from my the teacher, Koji teacher. His name is Nakaji, and he actually published a book, The Koji for Life in English. It's contained a Japanese explanation and a half and English explanation and a half. So it will be great for the people to understand more. Then actually Nakaji is from the sake brewery called the Teranda Honke. That's what Sandor mentioned it before. So that's only the place where they create the koji from nature, from like a wild east. So then that's the only the brewer that is in Japan. So with his experience, he developed a school, Koji. It's called a Koji no Gakko. It's like an English name, the Koji Academy. And I'm the member of the students. And that's how I get the title of the Koji, certified Koji specialist. And we are the member of about like 50 people now around the world. And half are live in Japan, and half are spread in the world, like in Europe and North America. And we always share the information together to update it, the newest information about the Koji. And we keep studying about the Koji and all of the kind that is related with the Koji. Okay, and how I started to teaching Koji is that as Nobi-san introduced to me, I started to have like a Japanese moms group, because that's where I started to seriously think about to send my Japanese culture to my kids. And the easiest way to having the group in Japanese so that we can share our thoughts and our knowledge. And this is just the beginning of having the group. We started to have some kind of like a bazaar, like selling the people. I think it's going to be a chance for the moms to, open mind to the outside society. But that brings me to start to solve the Japanese code. Simply mixture of berry, Koji, and the salted. I think this is just the base of started in other place in the world. And that's, let's say that's like in between the miso and soy sauce. And that's, I started to set it because it's very easy to start it. I just got the Koji from Japan and just mix it in the jar with the salted water. Actually, that's a more simple way. Just add with the soy sauce and the Koji, and we can make a very nice, tasty condiments. And that's where I started to have the idea of, well, some of my friends asked me why don't you make a miso? And I used to make a miso when I was in Japan, but it spent about like a year. And it's not like a very familiar with me to having like a fermented food with me all the time. And once I started to think about to make a 1 month miso, very short fermented miso, that's bring me up to, have an idea to live with the fermented food like all the time. That before that, it was like a kind of special food, the fermented food was very special. But once I started to teach and learn about the 1 month miso, that brings me more like a everyday life, deeply connected with our like everyday life. And this is how I started to teach the peoples. And yeah, this is a picture of the mochi, that Sandor Sandor introduced us. So this is what we do at the end of the year. Yeah, but anyway, so this is part of the program and events that we do at the Hidamari Club, like a gathering together. But anyways, so this is how I started to teach how to make miso, and I found that how great the koji is. And this is where I started to make koji by myself. And that's started the journey of how difficult it is. And by the time, no one knows, there is no, there is a book, but the book is always difficult. The book is written for the people who are like specialists for like working at a miso company or like a sake or soy sauce. They're always special. So nothing is very close to our the everyday life. Then I found Nakaji-san, who was saying on the Facebook, saying that I'm thinking to having a class through the online. And I was like, oh yes, yeah, please started to doing that. Then once we started, and I was the first member of the students. And since then, we started to learn each other. Then this is how I grow, develop more to teach how to make miso. And by the time I started to teach how to make miso and meeting and sake and soy sauce, everything. And at the same time, I became a certified acupuncturist and started to practice. I started to practice acupuncture. And so everything has been changed since COVID happened, 2020 in April. And I wasn't able to practice to the people and have a lot of time. So once I started to do the online classes and I changed my mind, I changed the style to do it. So before that, I was more focused on to the Japanese moms to tell what is the Japanese culture is and how important it is. And actually, when I started to teach miso, there's so many people who are seriously, thinking about it's very important to have a very tasty miso, which is impossible by the time, like 8 years ago. Then we found out that's the only way that we can have the tasty miso is that making by ourselves. And this is pretty much makes sense to me to have make a koji by myself and make a miso by myself. But usually people think like same as I do before, it must be very hard to do. It must be hard to process, hard to do. Even like people say, is it possible to make a miso in Toronto? Of course, right? Wherever you live, you can make a miso. So this is like a little by little step that I can try to teach the people. So I also have a higher level of like a teaching, like a more detail, but it's not necessary to the people who doesn't know anything at all. So this is kind of my field that I wanted to be always connected with the Japanese moms who wanted to send this culture to the next generations. Like for example, the people I've seen many people in here when I have a booth to open up to sell to the misos, and some people say that I know miso, but I've never tasted, even though they look like Japanese and they don't speak English. But then I found that how hard it is to pass this generation to the next generations. And I heard that usually passing through 2 generations, all the culture is gone. And this is us who live in here in Canada to send this Japanese culture to my sons. If I stay in Japan, I don't have to do anything at all. Miso is everywhere, and the CN commercials, they're always talking about like a seasonal event and something like that. Even like sing a song about the events. I found that I'm the one who have to tell to my sons. So this is like a little by little step, and each step that the people supposed to send it to someone. Otherwise, it's going to be disappeared. So when I was in Japan, I don't think anything at all. But since I started to live in abroad, and I found that it's how important it is. And I just rethink that if it may be possible to that people who live in Japan who doesn't even notice how important it is and what they're supposed to do. So I think it would be a good idea for me to send the information from abroad to the people who live in Japan. What is in reality in here? the people who live in a board who trying to keep this culture to the next generations. And this is like one of the main reasons that I do these activities. And I really hope that passing this beautiful culture to the next generations. And at the same time, why I practicing the acupuncture, I can tell exactly the same thing. And I've seen at the film, and they say that the fermentation is not only the cooking method, it's more like a life lessons. So, it's important to know about how to make koji or sake or anything like that. But at the same time, we have to know that like our hearts and our thoughts. So, looking at the body's health is the same thing. If we think about like a function of the body, it's not enough. So we have to see like a whole entire body instead of like one part. So I think it's like a huge connection is working together. And either when I started to talk from the Koji side or from the like a healthy side, it's always the same thing. And I'm very passionate with that and very happy to have this work as my lifetime job. Okay, like that. Okay, so I just bring it back.
Okay, that's wonderful. Thank you very much, Shiori-san, for sharing your insights and your inspiration. Especially, you can see that how passionate you are with sharing your knowledge about fermentation. So that's great. So I'm going to go into some of the discussion questions. I think the first question I was going to ask was how you got started into making fermented food and drinks, but I think both of you have already shared that in your talks. I guess my next question is just, what sort of fermented foods or drinks are in your fridge? Or I think Sandor, you already showed us some wonderful takuan, and you have some sake and shoyu, and it looks like there's so many wonderful looking pots in and behind you. I have some umeboshi and some kimchi and some sauerkraut and miso in my fridge. What are some exciting projects dancing around in your refrigerator and in your house?
So should I start with that?
Sure, yeah.
So I have been working on a book that I'm calling Fermentation Journeys. That's really about my travels. And so, I've been really developing recipes. And so, I have a couple of different chichas going, like South American fermented beverages. I have one that's with quinoa, and another one where I'm sprouting corn to ferment. I'm making some, let's call it like the Chinese equivalent of sake, mi-ju, fermented sticky rice. Oh my God, that one is smelling so good right now. And then I have one that I want to show you that it's really different from anything Japanese, and yet it was inspired by Japanese tradition. And this is basically a pickling medium that is made from turmeric and garlic and turnips. But I first witnessed this when I was in Australia at the beginning of last year. And an Australian guy who has a pickling business in Tasmania had been inspired by the idea of nuka, nukazuke. And nuka is a pickling bed of rice bran that's a perpetual pickling bed. So once you develop it, you put some vegetables in, leave them for a few days, take them out and eat them, put some more vegetables in. So at his home, he had a big crock of a paste like this that was 4 years old, that he had been burying vegetables in and taking them out. And I just last night or 2 nights ago, I took this daikon radish that was the size of this whole thing. It filled the whole thing. and it was so beautiful. And it had like this, it looked like the sun. It had like a ring of yellow around the outside from the pigment of the turmeric absorbing in, and beautiful, mild, sour, salty pickle flavor. It was really, really lovely. And so, this is one of my ongoing experiments. And then I'll show one more, and this is cassava in water. And I'm just fermenting the cassava, and I'm making an Ecuadorian dish called yuca podrida. And yuca is the Spanish name for cassava, and podrida is a Spanish word which means rotten. It's not rotten at all, but it's fermented. And the cassava has a very, very plain flavor. But by fermenting it, like fermenting any very plain flavored food, it just develops a more pronounced, I would say, much more interesting flavor, and it becomes much more digestible. So, at this moment, I have a lot of different, for me, experimental ferments going on. And, my kitchen, you could ask my partner, but my refrigerator is just, packed full of, different kinds of ferments, different, different misos, different sauerkrauts, different kimchis, different pickles, lots of different things. The world of fermentation is infinite.
Yes. Thank you. And how about yourself, Shiori-san? What fermented goodies are lurking about in your house?
Okay, I used to have a lot of kind of thing like a Sandor, but since I started to change to the online class, I kind of stopped to making Koji and many things. But I just found that what do I need as a mom or like a wife, as a main cooking person. What I have is Koji and shoyu Koji and salted Koji. That's the main thing. And Bodaimoto, that's a Sandor told us. Yeah, this one here, the sake. I made it without any lactic acid and without any using the yeast that is coming from the outside. So that's the basic thing that I'm gonna use for my cooking, mainly. And I also have a mirin that is aged for about 1 year to 3 years. But I kind of hesitate to use it because it's rare. But I wish I have more so that it's gonna be more aged. I heard that a 10 years aged of mirin is same as a chocolate. I'm so excited to have that. So I tried to make more to ferment it more. So, but more focus on little kinds. Other than that, we won't be able to live in a very small place with a lot of mirin. Yeah, mirin.
Nice.
nice. And there's a different ingredients exist in a different parts in Japan. So even just one, you say let's a miso, there are so many different kind of miso that I would like to try with the different grains and different, even simply say soybean and salt and Koji, but with a different ratio, it's turned to a different flavor and different taste. And so try to make a little container to set it up to make it tiny just to do it. But anyways, I try. Yeah, I have a lot of things there. And the one mentioned thing is that the umeboshi, it's supposed to be the real one. So my umeboshi is a special, but it's from my mom from Fukuoka. That's the only way that I can get it. And it's impossible to grow the ume plum in here in Canada. So I'm looking forward to see is there any way to get the real plum in North America so that the people were able to make a umeboshi in here. Yeah, but usually the umeboshi that you can get it from the store, it's not the real one. I mean, it's the pickle with some kind of liquids, but it's not natural, so you gotta be careful. And even most of the Japanese people doesn't know it, so just sometimes emphasize how important it is. You can use it as a medicine as well. Yeah, so umeboshi is very powerful. try to find it. Yeah. Okay.
I have one more Japanese-inspired ferment that I just want to share, which is that I have come to love natto. I mean, the first time I tried natto, I didn't love it, but
For sure.
you know, I was encouraged to try it again, and
Right.
you know, as my taste evolved, like I really love it now, and I make it pretty regularly. But sometimes if I have some that sits in the refrigerator for a long time and gets really, really strong, what I do is I dehydrate it. So this is dehydrated natto.
Right.
And then I grind it up with roasted sesame seeds and spices. And so, you know, I make like a little, I make a little spice. So this is with natto, sesame, dried chili peppers, and this one has Szechuan peppercorns. But I make them with different spice combinations, and you know, it's like I've found that a lot of people who would reject fresh, sticky, stringy natto actually can enjoy it, you know, the flavor of it as a condiment when it's dried and powdered. And I got the idea of that because I saw in some other places in Asia, I saw in Myanmar and in China, people using natto dried mixed with other things as a seasoning.
Right, exactly. Why don't you try to dry it under the sun? It's called hamanatto. Have you heard that before?
Well, I've heard of hamanatto as ferment, like whole soybeans made into koji.
Exactly.
And then dried and soaked in water. So I have made hamanatto. I described that process in this book.
Right. Yeah, that's right. So that's the proper way to make a hamanatto. But I just wondered if you can try with the under the sun so that you can get more like, you know, vitamin D from that.
Oh yeah. No, I definitely know. I dry it under the sun. For sure. I mean, you know, if it's sunny, you know, if it's cloudy, then I have a little dehydrator. I'll put it in.
Yeah, I see.
But the sun is the sun. You know, like a sunny day is the best way to dehydrate anything. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, that's great. Okay.
So, so you mentioned natto and a lot of the tsukemono and koji. They all have a lot of health benefits. Can you share with us some of the things that each of you maybe that you enjoy on a regular basis to stay strong and have and maintain your health, particularly in light of the coronavirus and you know, trying to keep your immune system up? Is there something that you enjoy every day or every couple of days?
Shiori, would you like to go first?
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was expecting you to go first. Yeah, sure. Okay. So I'm thinking about that. When I think about that, then I believe that there's many professionals and many like doctors they're talking about how great and the benefit of the koji and the fermentations. And from me, I would like to say that like, you know, as one of the moms, I studied to do the free dobroku making class through online. And there was like more than 100 people join me to make a dobroku together. And the main purpose that I do is that I want everyone to have something while they're staying home. So when they stay home, then you feel like depressed, right? So I want them to do something. And once it started, it's bubbling and smelling, and it's so fun. And I want them to feel something while they're staying home. So then I think that's one of the like a big thing that the fermentation bring us the body healthy, which is like a feeling better, feeling nice, makes us happy. And when it's drink it or taste it, it's so tasty. So that happiness creates our body immune system up. Of course, there's a lot of benefits coming from that like an internal environment to create our feeling happy. You know, there's a lot of research for that. But at the same time, it's possible to approach from the outside, like simply it is. They don't have to know any knowledge at all. Just try to put something in a jar and looking at it with the time. And so many changes feel, then we can feel how there is a lot more like a possibility that we cannot see is existing here, so that we can feel and we can taste it. So I think that's one of the like a huge things that the fermentation can bring it to us.
Nice.
Okay.
Definitely good for mental health and Mhm.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I mean, I love what you just said. You know, I mean, I certainly eat a range of fermented foods every day, and you know, the most basic thing that I eat every day is just fermented vegetables in in some form or another. You know, I also I eat yogurt regularly. I eat miso regularly. You know, I eat natto semi-regularly. And I think that there's a lot of, you know, evidence that, you know, especially the living ferments, the ferments that haven't been cooked or heat processed, that the live bacteria in them, in their interaction with the live bacteria we already have in our intestines, you know, can really improve digestion and our ability to extract the nutrients out of the food that we're eating, get more out of our food. And there's also a lot of evidence that when we eat foods that are rich in living bacteria, it helps to stimulate our overall immune system. And there's a lot of new evidence that's finding connections between our brain chemistry and how we think and how we feel and the bacteria of our intestines, and that, you know, eating these probiotic foods can potentially improve our, you know, brain clarity, mental health, things like that. You know, at the same time, I think that all of these, you know, all of these benefits are general benefits that can benefit anybody. And I think that, you know, when people rush to say that, you know, eating fermented foods is going to protect you from COVID, you know, I don't think it's reasonable to, you know, like assume that there's any specific activity towards this, you know, new virus that we ultimately know very little about. So I think that, you know, everybody can benefit from improved digestion, improved immune function, and improved mental health. And I think for people who are dealing with, you know, specific health conditions, I mean, eating these foods maybe will help, maybe they won't. I really, you know, try to steer clear from, you know, creating expectations that, you know, oh, this food fights cancer. I mean, there's a lot of evidence that all fermented vegetables, you know, have anti-carcinogenic compounds. You know, there's some evidence that, you know, miso has compounds that help to, you know, draw, you know, heavy metals out of our bodies. But, you know, none of these are treatments for particular diseases. We have, you know, at least on the basis of current research, we have to understand them as, you know, general enhancements of our health rather than specific therapies for specific conditions, you know, or, you know, a strategy for preventing something like COVID.
I think that's very important to say. So, Sandor, thank you very much for making people not think, okay, I'm going to just eat, you know, 1,000 buckets of takuan and that's going to help me, because that's
then I'm
not
going to take my mask off and go run
Yeah.
through buildings in Toronto. Yeah.
No, yeah, that's not going to work. Right.
That's right.
Something that I thought was a really interesting thread that both of you, when you were talking, I found was that fermentation really does help you connect with a lot of things. You know, not just with you and your own body, but also with nature and your food and the land and your family and with people around the world. So yeah, I'd be very curious to know for yourself, what does fermentation connect you to the most? Like, what do you find it connects you to? Maybe Shiori-san, you want to start, and then Sandor?
Yeah, please, Sandor, please start it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I mean, just, because, fermentation has taken me all around the world. I mean, I've taught probably more than 1,000 workshops in about 25 countries. Certainly it's connected me to many, many, many people, and sometimes it's, it's just like this. So, it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes, but also I feel, like it's exciting to me that so many people are interested in this. And it's exciting to me, like the story that Shiori told me earlier, that, I was able to connect her with someone. I met them both at the same event, and I connected them. And, that's one wonderful thing about getting to meet so many people, because I've been able to learn about fermentation in so many different places. It's exciting to be able to connect the dots and, talk about, similarities between what I've seen in South America and what I've seen in Asia. But really the biggest connection that fermentation has given me is, an awareness of invisible forces. And this is what makes fermentation so mystical, is that, we can't see this life force, and yet, fermentation, backed up by the, emerging science of microbiology, just tells us that there are these microscopic, invisible life forces that are present on all of our food, all of the plants and all of the animal products that we, that we eat. And to me, the miraculous thing is that, thousands of years ago, without the benefit of microscopes and microbiology, people all over the world developed techniques, practical techniques for working with these invisible life forces on our food. So, that's the thing that I love the most about fermentation, is it just connects me to this. And, when I have a garden, when I'm working in my garden, I'm, very aware, of all this like powerful life force that's in the soil, on the roots of the plants, part of the developing plants, and that, in the end, many of those organisms will become, the powerhouse behind the things happening in the jars in my kitchen.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and Shiori-san, is there something you want to share about how what is it about the connections that fermentation brings?
Okay, I think I better talk before Sandor talked. It was very, very wonderful, and I don't know what to add. But to me, like a fermentation connects me, like myself, and everything. So it connects everything for sure, like a people and a culture and a cooking rate and everything. But the first time that I connected with this is that I'm interested about the health matters, and seriously thinking about what I eat, and like exercise and a mental problem. I try to connect these things together. But then when I immigrated here, then I have another different environment and this different like a situation that I have to deal with. But whatever it is, like to me, like a fermentation, like a learning fermentations connects me, like a makes sense to me. So all the microbe systems that we cannot see, these kind of things, and even the sources that we need for our life. That's the answer. All of the answer is in the fermentations. Like all the answer is included in the fermentations. So once I started to learn about things and know many information from any others, I found that the thing that I'm struggling with is not only me. Everyone have the same thing. Even like in a different cultures and different place, even like a different decades, everybody has like a same kind of problem all the time. And when I'm looking at like a fermentation world, there is some answers for it. Even it's a different perspective, different way to say it, different language, it's all the same. So I think it's very fascinating. This is how I found it. It's connected to everything about me.
Awesome, thank you. Where do you see fermentation, particularly fermented foods from Japan, in the future? So maybe in 10 years and 20 years, do you think maybe those going to be like skimono bar on the corner, and you can just find your pickled goods more commonly in North America, or you think it's going to be more of a global mesh where you like the wonderful turmeric, garlic, daikon, like maybe we'll see more of that happening. What do you think, Sandor?
Well, I would say of the world fermentations, Japanese fermentations are already, among the most prominent, at least in North America. People, people are more likely to be familiar with shoyu, with miso, than with ferments from other parts of the world. But I think that there's every indication that they will only become, more popular. I would love to see, more different Japanese ferments become available and popular here. I have a friend who started a natto business in New York, and I think that that's actually going very well, and that she's finding that there's more demand than she had anticipated for natto produced in North America. I'd love to see more natto. I'd love to see more tsukemono. And I also think, it's exciting for me to see, so many visionary chefs who are not necessarily Japanese, not necessarily cooking Japanese style cuisine, working with Koji and the power of Koji. So I'm thrilled seeing, sort of all of the, kind of imagination and innovation happening with Koji. Last night, when I watched the movie about Katsuo-Bushi, that's something I'd love to see a lot more of in the US, and, sort of more high quality product available rather than, pre-shaved flakes. I would love to see it, but I would also love to see, more awareness and availability of ferments from many different parts of the world. I'd love to see more from Japan, but I'd also love to see, more of the, Western ferments represented in North America, more of the South American ferments. I just want more fermentation, because, fermented foods are just so full of, flavor and vibrancy.
Yes, great. Thank you, Sandor. And Shiori-san, what do you think? Do you have some insight?
Yeah, okay. As a Japanese, from a Japanese perspective, we're kind of like surprising that how the world of the people accepted the Koji cultures. And we're in Japan, very small country, and we're too much strict with the common sense. This is what the Japanese people does. And it's a good way and in a bad way. We try to keep this culture to the, strictly next generations. This is how we've been doing that more than 1,000 years. So there is strict, what is it? Like a kura, there's a rule that only one people in the family will be able to pass into the next generations, next persons, not in the family. It has to be only one person, and it has to be only told by oral, not be written down, something like that. This is how strictly tell the secrets to the next generations. This is how our culture keep it to the next generations. But there's a person who was actually in the film, in the shoyu, and his name is Skeno-san. He is the president of the Koji company. He is the one, I heard from him that it's too old-fashioned. It's important to keep the same thing, but at the same time, we're supposed to spread out for the next generations. He's supposed to change his way to tell the techniques to the next generations. So this is how I found the idea it's important to tell to the people. So I'm the one who is the Japanese to tell to the next generation in a strictly Japanese way. But at the same time, I'm very welcome and very thrilled to feel, to see and to look at it and how other people trying to apply the technique of the Koji into, mixture with their cultures. So I think it's okay to have, but for us as a Japanese people, we have to kind of get used to it. So for example, incubate the Koji culture into the meat. It's impossible for us. We cannot even think about the idea. So many ideas that the Sandor told me, oh what? I have mixed with this and that. It's impossible. So many breaking out the rule to make a new world. I think it's a wonderful thing. But at the same time, as a Japanese people, to tell to the Japanese generations, it's important to keep a strict rules. What is the base meaning of making miso? Is spending 4 seasons, starting prepare in January and passing through the cold season, and after that, and passing through the very high humid and high temperature season, and after that, it's become a nice miso. But in a Western way, they keep 60 degrees for a couple months, right? It's okay to do that, but we are the ones, we have to accept that. We try to say, no, this is not a proper way to make it, but So this is us who have to get used to it. But actually, I believe that there is 2 ways. That the one way is strict with the Japanese way to the Japanese people, and at the same time, breaking out the rules and a free world, to have a free idea, to have more unbelievable world exists. I think it's going to be a great idea, and I think I'm looking forward to see a great feature combining with the different cultures. I think it's going to be a wonderful and huge work in the futures. Okay?
Yeah, definitely. I think especially in Canada and in Toronto, with this really diverse multicultural city, that sort of synergy comes together where the different cultures are, they ferment together and then they create something new. There's actually a former a colleague who worked at the Japan Foundation, Jess and Fumi. They created a miso topping. Their company is called Abokichi, and it's like a chili miso. Yes. And they're doing really well, and it's kind of picking up across the country. Yeah, I guess so. This is going to be the last question, but maybe can you share with me some of the projects you're working on now? Sandor, I know you mentioned a book that you're writing and you're experimenting with some ferments at home. Yeah, maybe in the next couple of weeks, what sort of things will be occupying your time?
Well, I mean, the next couple of weeks, I'm trying to wrap up this book. My deadline for this book, Fermentation Journeys, is at the end of January. So I'm really focused on that. Yesterday, I did a funny experiment. I made a sauerkraut chocolate cake.
Wow, nice.
And this is something that I had been served at a dinner years ago. So I'm just I am a wide experimentalist, and I really enjoyed hearing what Shiori just said, because I mean I recognize that from the perspective of any of these ancient traditions, it can be really unorthodox, breaking the rules to do things in very different ways, to recombine them. And I mean, I think we have to have some respect for tradition, and all of these, nobody's invented any new fermented food or beverages for hundreds and possibly thousands of years. And we have to respect the ancestors who had the incredible wisdom to figure these things out. And yet we're living in this world where migration has just caused so many people to sort of move away from their ancestral lands. And, many of us are not the products of a single ancestral tradition, but, we ourselves are mixed from various traditions. And so it seems, more or less inevitable that, that the traditions will become mixed to some degree. So anyway, I just continue to experiment, but for me, the most important thing is just sharing it with people. Demystifying this process of fermentation. It's a mystical process intrinsically, but it doesn't have to be mysterious for people. It doesn't scary for people. And I love hearing about what Shiori is doing because, especially for people who, have moved from, one part of the world to another part of the world, like keeping their culture alive, passing cultural traditions on to their children is, it's really, really important. For people who, aren't really products of a single tradition, I think it's equally important just to recognize that, fermentation is something that is of practical benefit to everybody. And there are elements of it in everybody's tradition, and nobody has to be afraid of it. Fermentation is ultimately a strategy for safety everywhere, and the process of fermentation makes food safer. It is not a dangerous, risky proposition. So, really, I'm just going to keep on doing what I've been doing, which is, trying to, share information and, spread the gospel of fermentation and encourage, more people to take this up in their kitchens.
Awesome. Thank you, Sandor. Thank you. And Shiori-san, any update or some things that you're working on in this, maybe in the next couple of weeks? Actually, I know, was it at the end of December you did a Katsuo-Bushi workshop?
Yes. Yes.
With a small independent Katsuo-Bushi family
Yes.
in Kagoshima.
Yes.
Will you be doing something like that again, or?
Yeah, actually, the Katsuo workshop was run by the certified Koji teachers who live in North America. There are 3 people living in Los Angeles and Toronto, me, and New York. And we combined together and tried to make a free workshop for families who won't be able to come back to Japan due to the COVID. So the Katsuo-Bushi artisans from Kagoshima, and he wanted to feel the people to be in Japan. So that's the main reason to have the events. And the event was great. And then after that, we 3 of us get together and we started to think about to do some more other events for families, which creates more opportunity to tell the Japanese culture and in a different ways, like like a hocho, like a Japanese knife, and like a different sauces or like a different fermented food. So this is more like a mainly teaching to the Japanese families. But at the same time, I have my own online class, and we try to get it together like for a year. And I mainly does in Japanese because this is so many things that I wanted to tell to the people, like especially to the Japanese people, because I wanted to send it to the next generations. But at the same time, I know that how important it is to open up to the non-Japanese people. So I try my best to do a class for in English as well. But at the same time, I have to do the acupuncture practice as well. So it started from a little small area, but I try to tell to the people, then I have exactly the same feeling as Sandor says, that it's important to spread out this information and have more chance to have a people to make the things itself and feel it more. Then they started to think something. It's not necessarily the fermented food, but it brings them to wake up for about thinking something. So I just wanted to have that kickstart to doing that. So mainly the online workshop for Japanese people, but at the same time with the non-Japanese people. And in addition to the more like a free event to the Japanese families. That's our plan is for this year.
Excellent. Okay, well, I guess that's excellent to see. You guys are going to be continuing your fermentation path, and I just want to say truly thank you so much, both of you, for joining this talk. And I think the viewers will come away from this. Hopefully, they'll after they listen to this, they'll go to their kitchens and start making some fermented tsukemono or some tasty takuan or something wonderful. So thank you very much, and I hope we can meet face to face sometime soon in the near future. So thank you very much.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for organizing this.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.